Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sumit Rai. I am the CEO and founder of Cancer Check Labs, and I'm here today to tell you a little bit about cancer and the future of longevity as it pertains to cancer. In 2019, The Lancet published that cancer has now overtaken heart disease as the #1 cause of mortality in several high-income developed countries. Cancer is a really big problem. Today, 40% of the population will be diagnosed with cancer in their lifetime. In fact, it's going up. It just went up from 39.5% to 40%. 40.5 per the NCI, the National Cancer Institute. Is the mic working? Is the mic active? There we go. So it just went up from 39.5% to 40.5. The key to curing cancer is catching it early. Early detection is absolutely pivotal to beat cancer. Survival at stage 0 is 99%. The biggest risk factor today for cancer is age. The reason for that is because we are living biological organisms. As living biological organisms, we constantly have cellular turnover. Old cells die, new cells are formed. Old cells die, new cells are formed. This process goes on and on as long as we're alive. And so more replications of new cells occur with time, with age, which creates more chances for erroneous replications to occur, i.e. mutated precancerous cells. Cancer is such a big problem that it is now arguably one of the most active threats to humanity. Last year alone, there were 10 million recorded deaths in cancer. To put that in perspective, in just a century at that rate, not even accounting for population growth, or the incidence of cancer rising rapidly in the younger population, which is also concerning. Just at 10 million a year in 100 years, in one short century, that is 1 billion lives lost. Double-digit percentages of global population. There are not many things on the planet that actively threaten double-digit percentages of global population. Cancer is becoming so prevalent that 40% that will be diagnosed represents 1 in 2 men and 1 in 3 women. Half of men and 1/3 of women will be diagnosed with cancer in their lifetime. That is startling. Today, one of the issues is we only have 5 primary screens for cancer. And those screens include mammograms for breast cancer, pap smear for cervical cancer, colonoscopies for colorectal cancer, PSA for prostate cancer, and lung CT for lung cancer. Now, depending on your gender, you're not going to do all of them. If you're male, you're not going to do a mammogram, you're not going to do a pap smear. If you're female, you're not going to do a PSA exam. And most people will never do a lung CT. It's typically only prescribed if you have certain risk factors, genetic history, smoker, so on and so forth. So realistically, if you're male, you're going to screen for prostate with PSA, colorectal, possibly lung, that's it. If you're female, you're going to screen for mammogram, breast, pap smear cervical, colonoscopy for colorectal, and again, possibly lung, that's it. There is nothing today for pancreatic cancer, liver, kidney, esophageal, gastric, thyroid, adrenal, brain, skin, gallbladder, so on and so forth. Most solid tumor types, most cancer types today don't have a screen. And there are over 200 solid tumor types and primary subtypes today in the world of cancer. We don't even screen for a fraction of them. That's a problem. To address this problem, new screening modalities are coming to the market. Those modalities represent a sea of alphabet soup. CTCs, circulating tumor cells, ctDNA, circulating tumor DNA, cfDNA, cell-free DNA, MRIs, magnetic resonance imaging, genes, biomarkers, so on and so forth. All of these modalities are very different, and there's a lot of bad information out there because it is confusing. So one of my goals today is to clarify what these modalities are so you can make the right decision as to what you utilize for cancer screening. Let's start with circulating tumor cells. If you have a primary solid tumor, lung cancer, breast, colorectal, pancreatic, liver, bladder, brain, esophageal, gastric, thyroid, skin, adrenal, any organ tumor from which 100 million people a year suffer across the globe annually, the primary tumor itself generally does not kill you. What kills you is the tumor sheds tumor cells into your bloodstream that circulate, that are known as circulating tumor cells, or CTCs, the acronym for short. And the CTCs spread the cancer in your body in a process known as metastasis. And the metastatic effects make your biological organs dysfunctional, shut down, and you die. That's how you die from cancer. You don't generally die from this lump. Now, a lot is known about CTCs. They have been extensively and exhaustively studied over the past 30 years. A simple Google search on your phone would reveal thousands of papers on CTCs. Number one, CTCs are known to be the drivers of metastasis, the spread of cancer through the bloodstream, hematogenically. Number two, CTCs are known to be homologous, similar to the primary tumor, because they are cells of the primary tumor. They have the same DNA, the same genome. They are micromodels. They are little mini-me's in transit through your bloodstream to find more territory like Vikings, to invade your other organs and spread. Number three, CTCs are known to be prognostic, which means predictive of outcome. High CTC count, bad outcome. Lower CTC count, relatively speaking, better outcome. Now that's correlative, not causative. What's causative is high underlying tumor mass, high CTC count, bad outcome. Lower underlying tumor mass, lower CTC count, relatively speaking, better outcome. It's a function of tumor burden. Number four, CTCs are known to have the same reaction to drugs as the primary tumor because they are cells of the primary tumor, and much, much more. A circulating tumor cell is a biological cell. It is a messed up, mutated, dangerous, cancerous, aberrant, malignant cell, but it is a cell. It has the components of a cell. It has a nucleus, it has a genome with the DNA sequence, it has a cytoplasm, membranes, etc. When that CTC is shed from a primary tumor, one of three things is going to occur in the bloodstream. A, the cell is going to go through cell apoptosis, programmed cell death, where the cell and all of its components, including the genome, will shatter into little bits and pieces, and little strips and scraps of the genome, little tiny scraps of DNA, incomplete scraps of DNA, will be released into your bloodstream. That is what they call circulating tumor DNA, or ctDNA. Sometimes cell-free DNA because it's away from the cell. The cell is shattered. B, the CTCs will be eaten by macrophages, white blood cells, your immune system, which literally looks like a Pac-Man that comes and crunches it, and will break it and fracture the genome, and once again release little bits of DNA, incomplete strips and scraps. Or C, the CTCs will traverse through your capillaries, where the shear forces, the physical stresses will fracture them, and once again break the cell and its genome, and release the incomplete strips and scraps. What a lot of tests today are trying to do to detect cancer is use ctDNA. Little incomplete strips and scraps of DNA. And what they do is they take those scraps, they put them in a black box. They apply a set of mystical algorithms, AI, artificial intelligence, ML, machine learning, NGS, next generation sequencing, lots of computational processing, lots of smoke and mirrors, to extrapolate and guess whether or not they have a tumor cell. The problem with that is it's a guess. You cannot guess. The correct way to screen for cancer is to actually look for whole, intact, circulating tumor cells in the blood. Tissue, cellular tissue. Not to look for strips and scraps that have very little signal. That is like trying to identify a car with tire straps. Today, you also have MRIs. You all know what that is. The problem with using MRIs for cancer screening is MRIs are very sensitive on soft tissue. As we age, our bodies change. We develop bumps, lumps, cysts, lipomas. All of this is going to show up on an MRI. So you're going to come out of that tube and they're going to tell you, you have 17 lumps and bumps. What do you do with that information? You're not going to chop the patient open and do 17 biopsies. So all you've done now is create anxiety. And frankly, they will not tell you whether any of those lumps or bumps are actually malignant and cancerous. Then you have the category of genes and biomarkers. These are things like predictive genes to look at your risk. That's fine, except it doesn't tell you if you have cancer. Take something like BRCA1, BRCA2, a gene marker for breast cancer, known to increase risk. If you're positive for BRCA1, BRCA2, it doesn't mean you have cancer. It doesn't even mean you'll ever develop it. It just means your risk is higher. So what do you do with that information? You could be like Angelina Jolie and you could get a double mastectomy preemptively, but that's a pretty extreme intervention. Now, I don't fault her for that. Cancer is a very scary thing. They're afraid of finding it at stage 3, stage 4, where it becomes fatal. So they do that preemptively. But what would be better is a modality where we could actually detect it at stage 0. A modality that we have developed at Cancer Check Labs, using whole CTCs on glass slides for pathological examination in the palm of a pathologist under a microscope. CTCs are very interesting. They shed at very high rates when tumors are born. If you have 1 gram of tumor mass, let's say you had breast cancer, 1 gram is stage 0. 1 gram is so small it is not palpable, you cannot feel it. It is in fact so small they will typically refuse to biopsy because they will either miss or they will not procure enough tissue to be able to stain and diagnose. So 1 gram, which is not palpable, which is not biopsiable, and which is not diagnosable, kicks off about 3.2 million CTCs a day into your bloodstream. You have millions of circulating tumor cells, CTCs, in your bloodstream as soon as a tumor is born. Because all tumors, solid tumors, must shed to spread. It is the fundamental mechanism of metastasis. A tumor cannot go from stage 0 to stage 1, or stage 1 to stage 2, or stage 2 to stage 3, or stage 3 to stage 4 without shedding. CTCs are interesting in that they share certain physical and mechanical characteristics. Size, structure, rigidity, lack of malleability, lack of deformability. They're big, they're hard, they're stiff, they don't bend. Those parameters enable them to be selectively captured. Those parameters turn out to be uniform and homogeneous across all solid tumor types. As a result, if you capture them mechanically, as we do, you will capture them irrespective of source organ. Whether they're coming from your breast, your brain, your lungs, your prostate, your colon, so on and so forth. Which is why it creates a broad spectrum pan-cancer mechanism of action. CTCs also provide near perfect specificity. The reason for that is they are whole intact tumor cells. Tumor cells are morphologically distinct as compared to healthy cells. They are larger typically, 30, 40 microns instead of 8 or 10. They are multinucleated. They have 5, 6 nuclei instead of 1 or 2. They have high NC ratios, nuclear to cytoplasmic ratios. Because they are so nucleated, the nuclei will comprise 85-90% of the cell instead of 15 or 20. They are hyperchromatic. They have too much DNA because they are so heavily nucleated with genomes. These features are so pronounced that my 7-year-old daughter could tell you that's weird. A board-certified pathologist that is looking at a whole intact tumor cell on a glass slide is not going to mistake that for a healthy cell or a white blood cell. It is like comparing an elephant to a rabbit, which is why when the positive calls come out, they're positive, typically, and it produces near perfect specificity. ctDNA relies on guessing because you are just using incomplete scraps of the genome to extrapolate. That extrapolation is also highly erroneous and results in extremely high false positive rates. The reason for that is because there's so little signal with little bits and pieces of DNA that they have to amplify the signal to detect it, much like you do with PCR with viruses. If you get pricked in a hospital, you need a rapid HIV test. They use PCR to amplify the virus because they need more signal to detect. So because they don't have enough signal with ctDNA, they amplify it. The problem with that is amplification is okay when you have whole intact viral organisms. Amplification is not okay when you have highly unstable scraps of DNA. If you try to amplify them, you will mutate them, and you will have a healthy sample come in, which will get mutated and return a false positive. That's why ctDNA tests have such high false positive rates. They have low sensitivity. Why do they have low sensitivity? Because they have no signal. At the end of the day, when you use ctDNA-based tests, you have a machine that is guessing based on some of that data, extrapolation, magical algorithms. You do not have tissue to look at, which is obviously the gold standard. Everyone in this room knows that. MRIs also do not provide tissue. There are many MRI-based screening modalities that are being marketed today. None of them actually tell you if you have cancer. What type of cancer screen doesn't answer the question whether or not you have cancer? It just tells you you have a bunch of lumps and bumps. Now go figure it out. That's not very useful. And again, there is no tissue. Genes and biomarkers create anxiety. And they don't really tell you what to do. Yes, you can take some extreme proactive measures, preemptive measures, but they're often very invasive and dangerous. The only reason people use genes and biomarkers is because historically there has not been a good way to detect cancer very early for all solid tumors. That's it. It's a stopgap. Look, we all want to cure cancer. It's a massive problem for humanity. To put in perspective what I said earlier, about 10 million lives a year, over 100 years, 1 billion lives lost. In the history of the world, if you were to add up all fatalities from all wars known in human history, the best historians put it at 350 million people. You are talking about a loss of life from cancer in the next 100 years that exceeds that by 3x. So why do we do this? Who are we? Denny and I, the founders of this company, got into this for very personal reasons. We unfortunately both suffered unbearable losses in our family. Denny lost his brother when he was a teenager. He lost many of his family members. I lost my only sibling, my younger sister, to cancer. And so as a result, we're very active philanthropically. We are not a company that is out there strictly to go commercialize. That's not why we got into cancer. Danny and I were both tech entrepreneurs, investors before, and are both retired before getting into this. We suffered some losses, we got into this. I started my first nonprofit 12 years ago in 2012 called Cure Sonia. My sister's name was Sonia. In that nonprofit, We fund cancer research at Stanford, MD Anderson, USC, City of Hope. We do financial assistance for underprivileged families that cannot pay for their cancer care. I am one of the largest registrars of bone marrow donors in the world. I have registered over 10,000 people across 300 drives in 60 cities. I was nominated for the National Board of LLS, Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, for my contributions to combating cancer. I've been nominated for my PhDs in cancer biology because of this. I just started my second nonprofit, another 501c3 earlier this year, called Save a Firefighter, where we are screening every firefighter in the country for free with our test, starting with the Dallas Fire Department, our home city, where I'm donating $2.5 million a test to screen them. For us, this is very personal. We want the right solution out there. We want everyone to be educated on the differences between these modalities, because again, it is a sea of alphabet soup that can get very confusing if you don't understand the subtleties and nuances behind these tests. I'll stop there and open it up for some questions.